obviously, I think you got acquainted with our friend Selena, who is the local journalist that's sort of helping us sort of document what's happening in some communities on the ground. There's different initiatives that we've been sort of profiling in terms of local topics. The equity lens is something that we've been trying to capture in some of our stories. And then housing is another sort of topic that we've been looking at, given it's very much a focus in terms of the political interests. And then sort of combining the two, we thought of you in terms of your urban planning background, some of the community work that you're doing with Black Entrepreneurship Alliance. And then also, I know that throughout the years, you sort of shared with us some of the housing elements as well, with sort of the module ideas that you've had. And maybe throughout the years, there's been sort of maybe some reiterations of that initial spark that sort of were part of our initial conversations. So I would like to start off by saying, if you're able to take some time to introduce yourself and what organization you're representing, and sort of we can go and have a conversation starting from there.
Yeah, for sure. So again, formally, my name is Olu Velasa. I'm the manager of Black Entrepreneurship Alliance, which is a non-profit incubator established by Black Creek Community Health Center and York University, specifically Y Space, which is their entrepreneurship hub for a general student population, TD Community Engagement Center, which is all about connecting the university to community. Community is in Jane Finch. And then Schulich Executive Ed, which is part of the Schulich School of Business. And so BEA is a whole initiative, Black-led initiative, to advance and amplify the next generation of Black entrepreneurs and professionals. So it's great to meet you guys, and old faces and new faces. And yeah, and I oversee about a couple of different incubator and accelerator programs in the areas of agri-food, tech, and skill development. And so we have a positive trajectory, supported about 238 ventures. We're well over, I think, 4 million in regards to generated revenue with our ventures. And then they've raised about over $1 million. And we created about over 138 jobs now and given out 76 micro-credentials for education. So 2 years, started in 2021, thankfully through the FedDev funding, FedDev Ontario. And yeah, we're going to continue to keep this movement forward and expand. So that's BA in a nutshell.
Great. Selena, do you want to kick us off in terms of some questions that you may have on your end?
Yeah, for sure. I guess my first question, as corny as it sounds, is like, what, I don't want to say what inspired you to do this, but more so, can you remember the moment that kicked off this idea that you're like, oh, I have to go and do this and have to bring these people up?
Yeah, nothing really expired. I fell into it. Like
Mm,
I love to support people and serve people. And I think that's what leadership is about. It's a serving mentality. It's not about a you mentality. So I fell into it. So as mentioned, urban planning, didn't necessarily like it. It was so far removed. And I would say I fell into local economic development, and then I fell into entrepreneurship, just to supporting some brick and mortar businesses.
okay.
Uh, as alluded to, I was doing like a modular, really looking at prefab, how to support community and also local businesses. And that kind of led down that pathway of supporting diverse-led businesses to now Black entrepreneurs across the board, whether if you have a brick and mortar, e-commerce, you're going national, whatever, we support it all. I kind of fell into it. Um, and yeah, I love it, like in terms of, and I love to, and it's great because I get a mixture of both worlds. So I left planning, but it's a lot of my work is still informed by planning.
Yeah.
There's a lot of intersections between entrepreneurship, innovation, and the built form or infrastructure, how folks interact with it. There is that major intersection, especially when it comes to housing, right? Would love to talk about that a bit more. But yeah, I got a call. I got a call late night, and it was like, "Hey, do you want to run this?" And I'm like, "For how much money?" For one, that checked out. And then it was like, "Hey, it's like you're running a startup." And I'm like, I came from government, and I'm like, what do we know about being risky? We're very risk adverse.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't look back, honestly, and it's been a whirlwind and supporting different folks. Got a chance to go to Portugal, got a chance to go to some other places to really connect to other entrepreneurs, and you find that it's same but different when it comes to
Yeah.
the barriers of Black entrepreneurship and just diverse entrepreneurship in general. But yeah, again, just to a roundabout way, I fell into to this great position.
I feel like those are the best ventures. The best ventures are the ones that you're not expecting, and then it somehow falls into your lap.
Yeah,
With that being said, though, what keeps you going? I guess yes, like you support people, but I know days are hard and things like that. So like, what about that?
yeah, honestly, it's like being around entrepreneurs, you get an entrepreneurial like spirit, and it's all about
Hmm.
it's like you trade in that 9 to 5 for like every day is about business. You gotta think about it, right?
Yeah,
And so for me, I think I care. I want to do shit because I grew up in I'm a the millennial cohort, and I feel like nothing has been done, or like I would love to push the needle forward in terms of
yeah,
because look, less than 2% of VC funding goes to Black entrepreneurs. I think what 2.1% is Black um or Black owned businesses. It's like really low across the board. And
for
even when
sure.
looking at the professional side, not a lot of people that of color are in the C-suite level. So for me, it's
Yeah,
being that ethos is being scrappy, is about pushing the needle forward in terms of getting shit done. Excuse my French. Um, I really want to get something done with it, and we have on an individual level, but there's a lot more work to do, and that's what keeps me up. So
hmm,
I'm thinking about it from okay, how do I get more VCs to back, or how can I increase more VC back Black businesses? How can we get to that Black unicorn? How can we get that person to C-suite? How can we create an innovation district that supports the development of Black-led companies and also Black-led professionals? So those are the things that keep me up at night, and it keeps me up at night because Canada is very risk adverse. So
hmm,
how do we get to where we need to go with the barriers set ahead of us? So yeah,
for sure, for sure. And then I know you're working out of the Jane Finch Mall or the Jane Finch area, Jane Finch Mall.
three
Am I correct?
locations. Yeah, we
Oh,
got
three locations. Okay, word.
yeah. But obviously, none of it's like really owned by us. But three locations, like one Kiel campus, York, one
Okay.
is White Space Markham, and then we have the the office at Jane Finch Mall, which is also across from TDCC, which is a key partner.
Okay. So, because with that, I was going to ask, how is, well, you've worked out of that space, correct?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So how do you find working out of that space, I guess, brings more community in or like helps you kind of connect more with the community that you're working with?
Yeah, it's place based, right? People like
Yeah.
want to live, work, and play in their area. They don't want to move, or they don't want to travel so far. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that is the type of planning that I would like to see. A lot more place-based initiatives, a lot more place-based economic development, things
For
going on
sure.
in that area. And again, it's community physical space is, I would say, the foundation of community. That's where community meets, converges, eats, whatever. It's all
Mhm.
there, right? The issue about it with space is ownership. Do we own the space, regardless if it's in the community or not? Because there are spaces within the community that even though it's close, there's barriers because they don't own it, or it's not really public facing. And then you have, is it dedicated space? So even though we operate out of Jane Finch, the space that we're in is not dedicated space. It's not just all about entrepreneurship. It's actually the health center. So you're dealing with a lot more other things. Even though we have an office there, it's a whole other myriad of stuff that's going on there. But I would say definitely space within Jane Finch is important because
Mhm.
people, hey, they come to our office for idea consultations to really reason about, okay, how do you navigate this entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? So yeah.
I would love to sort of build on that a little bit. So one of the individuals that we spoke to and sort of capturing some of the local issues in terms of community is the community hub that's actually being built out of the Bloor Dufferin area. And right now, there's an amendment that's being done as part of that transaction. So the site was originally owned by the Ministry of Education's TDSB. It was underutilized, then sold to a developer. And one of the original conditions was that community space would be part of the transaction. And there is an amendment that's being done for the community space now to be reduced by 2,800 square feet. The team that's organized as part of that community, they're actually trying to fight 2,800 square feet may seem small, but when it comes to physical community space, it's actually quite large. So would love to build on your sense of community and making sure that physical space is still available for the demographic that makes up that ecosystem. Given that it's Jane and Finch, it's primarily equity seeking groups or people that identify as Black, or just it's also an economic mindset or economic that sort of builds the communities. So, with that being said, would you say that sort of the lack of planning when it comes to these type of communities coming together and being intentional with physical space being created in their communities, taking the time and the energy to be able to be intentional on those spaces that are intended for their groups? Yes, ownership is a setback, but how is it that the Black community can actually be more intentional on developing these spaces for their communities in order to sort of support future, whether it be future generations or future ideas in terms of entrepreneurship or businesses and so on? Would love to hear your take a little bit on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I would say it's getting involved, right? And I think what the project that you mentioned, isn't it by Dufferin Station, right? That monstrosity that they're trying to create. Yeah, I would say definitely it's about getting involved, because I think in Jane and Finch we also have that. We're going through the Jane and Finch initiative, which is a city-led process because the LRT is coming in. So we're thinking more intentionally about planning. But it still goes back to my other point, because we have the Jane and Finch initiative, but we also have the Jane and Finch hub that you're trying to develop on Metrolinx land. I would say because majorities of equity seeking groups don't necessarily have the financial power, we don't always have the say. So we can definitely get involved. I think that's always where you start, get involved in the process to kind of shape the plans. But I find there's theory and then there's practice. Like I feel like connecting the two is still not there, because we're coming from a very resource or lack of resource position. And so what I say to equity groups or Black-led groups is just being very, very political and always being a part of that process. But without financial backing, there's always an opportunity to get screwed over. Hence, Jane Finch Hub with the Metrolinx, they say, hey, you can get the land. Then they reneged it, and then they came back because the people got political. But then they're stalling the process, and then we don't know when the shovels will hit the ground. And sometimes developers get Black or equity seeking groups or Black populations involved just in the engagement process, but when it comes down to the real, like, let's start implementing, it stops, or it's like a 20-year project. Half of the people are not even going to be in this, not going to be on this earth when 20 years passes. So it's a very difficult thing to say, but I would say it's definitely around organizational capacity is what we're missing with a lot of these equity-seeking groups, in terms of how do you scale these groups to be those institutions to support these great infrastructure projects. I think that's where we start, outside of being political. Hopefully I'm answering your question. If not, I'm sorry, but I feel like there is that gap between the theory and then the practice, and that how do you bridge that is through finance and then organizational capacity, because not everybody's there yet. Very well intentioned, but they're not there yet to support these types of projects, because there's a lot of different infrastructure projects that's going on within Jane Finch. We got the hub, we got the condo development of the Jane Finch Mall. We
Mhm.
got Black Creek Farm. They're looking at doing some infrastructure. I don't know, pending. And then we got a potential CLT project, community land trust project coming down the pipeline. And then again, we also have our project as well, that's really focused on inclusive entrepreneurship and employment opportunities. So you got different infrastructure projects, but when it comes to ownership, when it comes to money, when it comes to capacity, it's all over the place. All right, which doesn't necessarily bode well with keeping the community at mind. And but again, we are doing our work where we can, is really getting involved with the political process, the communication process with the initiative, with the community development plan, as well as the master plans for what would Jane Finch look like 20, 30 years down the line.
Absolutely. What about community displacement?
Oh,
You have a little bit of a history in terms of working with Toronto community housing specifically. I know that you started your economical interests really on the ground when it came to that. From what I see, in terms of what I
yeah.
imagine, please correct me if I'm wrong. But understanding community housing in terms of what comes up with those communities and the intention of being uh, sort of planting some roots in those communities and then being established and organized to be able to, when initiatives such as the Metrolinx transaction or the condo development that's happening at the Jane and Finch um, corner, how is it that you're able to sort of earn your spot on the in terms of consultation? And yes, initial consultation is definitely there because you're already part of those communities.
Mhm.
But the displacement, once initiatives are actually starting to hit the ground, somehow it's like, oh, move aside
Yeah,
because we need to sort of start developing, we need to house you somewhere, but there's never an intention of bringing you back in terms of where your roots actually are. So we'd love
yeah,
to hear a little bit about that.
yes. That, oh man, you're gonna get me in trouble. But I don't care. That's always been a thing, right? And then that's like a critique of the whole planning process. And it goes back to the point of, okay, the theory part of, okay, we engage the community, but when it comes to actually implementing, the community's lost in the sauce. And a lot of people think, hey, especially this is a critique for planning, is that you're just checking off a box when it comes to community engagement. Displacement has always is always an issue. I know for TCHE, working with them in a past life, especially I think it was I think who stopped I think it was Regent Park with the zero displacement, and now that they have that policy throughout all Revite communities. But with it's that's also very tricky at the same date at well at yeah, it's very tricky. And when it comes to gentrification, when it comes to any changes in the community, that's always a thing in terms of residential displacement, but also commercial displacement, because a lot of businesses are being like Little Jamaica, even though like the transportation development of I think the crosstown, look at it was like over 200 black businesses. Now it's like under 140, and it's reducing even further. So that's I think it's residential and also commercial displacement. I think getting involved is putting those policies in place, because there are that precedent with Regent Park with the zero displacement policy. But then you really have to, this is also very tricky. It's just like you also have to watch not just in the communication process, but also the development process. You have to, but even in the development process, it's the ones that have the most money have the most say. Sorry to say, but it's about getting really political with that and being very savvy in terms of policies, in terms of land use tools to control some of the displacement. I know they've been doing what is it called, inclusionary zoning last time I checked. But they don't always really work out, because like, oh yeah, we're gonna get rid of affordable housing and we're gonna have a percentage of affordable housing in the new developments, but that's not always the case. And I don't have the answers for that. I say yes, you have to get political, but it comes down to, do we have the capacity and do we have the money to get this done? But I think there are some developers that are a little bit more hip to it. A lot of affordable, sorry, not-for-profit developers that are listening, that want to engage truly, and are taking people throughout that process as opposed to looking at a checkbox. But again, I would say that's really case by case. Not everybody is of that same school of thought, but there is a hopeful trend of folks really doing that, as well as a lot of organizations are getting more savvy as well. They're looking at community land trusts. They're looking at commercial land trusts, really focusing on securing and making spaces for businesses, because affordable commercial space is a big thing, as well as affordable housing. So you do see those groups popping up. So like Chinatown, Kensington, Little Jamaica with Black Urbanism Toronto. You do see those savvy groups that are kind of, they know the process because they are planners, they are economic developers, they are policymakers, so they're really savvy in terms of their navigation of it. So that I'm very hopeful of that, and then they're willing to share and provide knowledge mobilization to other folks that are not there but want to get there. And then you see a lot of initiatives as well. Sorry, to stop me from rambling. You see a lot of initiatives started by universities now, really looking at creative mixed use in terms of, okay, how do we meet this objective, but also how do we think about community in a different way? Because not
Well,
everybody wants.
also bridging of education, right? So
Exactly.
there's exactly. So there's some community groups that are first generation in terms of migration to Canada, for example. Equity seeking groups, especially Black communities, are very small in numbers when it comes to sort of Canada as a whole.
Yeah.
So the first generation is always the struggle in terms of really planting those roots, and there's displacement that happens along the way. So educational has been something that has not been sort of passed down amongst generations, because migration has been sort of a focus, in my opinion, at least.
Mhm.
So education and creating that bridge. I really love the fact that there's micro-credentialing that's becoming a focus or a part of conversations amongst employers, potential employers, entrepreneurs, economic development hubs, and then post-secondaries. They're creating a bigger bridge in terms of folks able to make that investment, and hopefully it sort of translates to dollars. Would love to hear in terms of, are you seeing that in terms of the micro-credentialing that's happening within your organization, or also the collaboration that's happening with York University? Is the intention actually being felt right now, or do you see it being felt in sort of future iterations of the program?
Yeah, I would say for few. Well, we've been seeing individual impacts with our micro-credential programs and knowledge mobilization forums, but I think a lot of it will be for future, just seeing that, hey, this is the stuff that we stocked up and people are going to different spaces and this is the result of it. I think we're like one of the few within the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem that do give out micro credentials, because again, education is a barrier, regardless
Mhm.
of the fact. So we give out micro credentials that are worth like $5,000, but who has $5,000 off the bat to do that? So we cover that. We do see there's a lot more initiatives and opportunities for micro credentials from the university side, from our side, and across the board from different areas, whether it be for infrastructure, because there are a lot more, there's initiatives to the Infrastructure Institute for equity seeking groups to get that knowledge on an individual basis, but organizational basis. And then you have it for regular business education, like student education on the other side. So I would say there's micro-credentials across the board. Yeah.
Okay. I think what I was, I guess, kind of mulling over in my head was the idea of, because a lot of the conversations that we've had with community members are about the paywall, and the idea of, like you mentioned before, like the barrier to entry for a lot of these things and getting a lot of these opportunities is who has the money and who doesn't, right? And I think my overall question is, how do we, I guess, navigate, especially like equity
Equity seeking groups.
I mean, it's a
sorry,
mouth.
that is a tongue twister. um but people, yeah, equity seeking groups and things like that, and low income families, how do we navigate around building or being able to build a community without having it all be behind a paywall, whether it be like community centers that are paid for, or especially because so I grew up around the Jane and Finch area. I grew up on Grand Ravine, and I grew up around Jane and Shepherd. So I know what it's like to be a kid in those areas, especially with nothing to do or no one to really do anything with. And either you don't have the thing and you kind of seek trouble, or you just are bored, or you're in the house all day and that's kind of the rest of your life. And I think my biggest thing is, yeah, I wish I had some more community focused programming or things like that. But then those either tend to cost a lot of money because they're private owned or things like that, or they're just not accessible in the area at all.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a system issue that you that you're talking about. But I think I don't know your age, but I assume you're closer to my age, and I feel like we never had that when we were growing up. 'Cause I grew up in Rexdale. We didn't have that, but I think there's a lot more programs that are popular
Mm-hmm.
that create that sense of community. And I think it comes down to not always money, but it's what I'm finding. It's networks. It's
Mm-hmm.
the soft stuff that no one really talks about, how to get into that room. And I think there's a lot more programs that facilitate that now that are more place-based within community as opposed to before. Because I mean, before there was like literally there was like nothing. Like what did I do? I usually like went downtown or just chilled. Uh,
Yeah.
Now there's a lot more things popping up, but I would say all those new initiatives are very new. Like they're
Yeah.
maybe like 5 years at most.
Mm-hmm.
And I always just say like give us grace because like this black entrepreneur ecosystem just came up at a maybe it's like five. The new version is 5 years. I would say the legacy is BPA, and that's like I would say the only one Ontario based. Or yeah, that's like what 42 years now. Um, so I would say is a sense of community and as well as access to networks, which gets you. It's a loophole for that paywall. And I had
Mm-hmm.
a conversation with expert in Canada. It's the same thing. How we're thinking, how do you take a home-based business, a nano business that's making like nothing, has no employees, to a small business level, which is like 500K plus with a couple employees. So how do you take that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about it's the networks discussion. How do you? It's the social procurement. It's about contracts, but who's controlling those contract institutions? Who's behind the institutions?
Mm-hmm.
It's not networks. So how do you
Yeah.
so it's like putting people on game with that you don't community doesn't always need money all the time. It's about
Mm-hmm.
who can give you in-kind stuff, who can you leverage to do this, da, 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 right? And then the money comes in, right? So
For sure.
that's what I would say. But a lot of these programs that facilitate that, they're all fairly new. I think now the communities it's like okay how do we cultivate that soft community for those networks to increase our social capital and how do we pair it up with actual hard physical infrastructure. Those two together are very powerful. um we haven't solved it yet because I feel like one is it's like one leg over the other, so I'm like but we will get there, hopefully not the next generation but this generation.
For
But
sure.
again, it's a system issue. Um, and for me, it's I'm all about ownership in terms of what does that look like? Financially,
Mm-hmm.
socially, economically. But again, give us grace. We will get there.
I
For
have a
sure.
question in terms of young people being involved in terms of the creation of their communities. We talked about a little bit about displacement. Affordability has a lot to do with that, and a lot of time is spent on making ends meet where you're not able to actually plant roots in communities because you're being sort of outfunded or the rent is being you're being issued a N12 just because the greedy man is trying to get some more rent out of the next person that's able to occupy that space. So with that being said, how are young people are able to be more intentional in terms of filling that knowledge gap by also making sure that their what's going in their pocket is actually going to serve them for the long run. So the careers that are being selected, the processes that are you're being involved in, the programs are being offered to them, but are they being utilized to the full capacity, or can we do a better job in terms of organizing as what the intent is of the serving that we're doing for our communities? can tell you that education through media has been doing mentor-based training for youth for the last 20 years. And the intention is really holding their hand and making them go through the systems that we were sort of discussing. There's issues there, but let them decide what the issues are, because we're going to be out of touch very soon. Let them decide in terms of what's going to make it a little bit better for it to be more impactful for the person that's behind them. Would love to hear in terms of the mentorship element on how young people can sort of be paired with a mentorship and the impact that they can potentially can have, but then also them taking the time of the value, the most valuable that thing that they have, which is time, making it to their full utilization to make sure that they're creating the best version of themselves as they start getting into their adulthood or their independency.
Yeah, mentorship is very, very key. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because mentorship allows many different things. It allows you to be aware beyond what's going on in your community that impacts your community. We also have that mentorship. We which is interesting enough, we have a co-op placements with high school students with TDSB and New York region, really focusing on Black youth, getting them involved into business, whether it be on the incubator side or working with our founders and then connecting to industry. And again, there is a lot more talent development programs across the board for racialized communities. So like, let me shout out Icon Talent, Onyx, really focusing on getting BIPOC youth into corporate positions and navigating through that and where to be where. So you're seeing a lot more early intervention type strategies and tools being incorporated into not only BEA, but across the board. Again, I would say it's fairly new. I think when I was growing up, not a lot, or they were hidden, or maybe I would have to go downtown for them. Um, so you see that with mentorship, and you find like a lot of folks, they just don't know, because I feel like a lot of youth or the youth in underserved communities, their world is their block. That's literally about it. So how do we get them to expand? Because they have a lot to contribute, right? And a lot of issues do impact them within their community. And we're seeing a lot of that. But also, we don't want to waste their time. So there's also paid opportunities as well. But for me, there's more now more than ever is incorporating a lot more early intervention stuff. Like, so right now, BA is doing like an infrastructure type project. We actually have a report. We are interested in developing, because when we started, we were the only like comprehensive incubator that services Northwest Toronto. And that's a damn shame, because like a lot of them are centralized in the downtown core. And that's an issue, because I'm like, when it comes to early intervention, when it comes to good paying jobs, they don't know. Like, a lot of the jobs that are presented to us is not, I love construction, but not everybody wants construction. And you gotta be, and I hate everybody's pushing it. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna push construction, you gotta differentiate. There's office jobs, which I feel like youth are more interested in, and then there's like the hard labor. And then with both are rewarded, both provide money. Don't get me wrong, but you got to demystify that process. So during the pandemic, we were hit really, really hard, especially in Northwest Toronto, because a lot of jobs that presented are in the areas are very curious. We're a very transient community, um, very low paying, and a lot of like the professional, scientific, technical service type jobs, which are the white collar jobs, not really best represented within those areas. So you see a lot of activity, because a lot of people had to go to work. They didn't have the opportunities to stay home. Um, so for us is, how do you introduce those type of jobs to youth earlier on, so they are well aware of, okay, I like this and this. For me, it's like, I don't care if you go to that job, but I'm gonna give you that opportunity to say yes, yay or nay, and giving them that opportunity for that. Um, but I would say mentorship is big, very, very key. Generation Chosen, Success Beyond Limits, they do that within Jane Finch, really taking youth outside of their comfort zone, really mentoring them. And they really focus on the earlier youth. My focus is more so on high school, getting them into university, and then we work with a couple other folks that pay for The fees, because I know like there's like the onboarding application fees and so on and so forth to get them into STEM type related um, programs or STEAM, because I'm forgetting arts as well. So you are seeing it, but again, I think systematically when it comes to grants, it's very piecemeal. And so I would love, and I challenge my community and also myself, how do we make this into a more comprehensive and a pipeline between, okay, folks that are really focusing on really young children, us focusing on youth 16 to 29, and so on and so forth.
What influenced urban planning for you?
Say that again.
What influenced urban planning for you?
What influenced urban plan for me
Mhm.
to get into that field? That's what you're
Yeah. Mhm.
uh you know what's so funny? To be honest, I just fell into it. Like
You're
I
falling into a lot of things, Zulu.
hey, and I'm blessed and highly favored because it's working out for me. I would say plan no to be a little more serious. I think urban planning when I went to Barbados, right? Seeing like some folks have big mansions, other folks have shacks, and all in some. It was just too messy for me. So I was like, why is that? So I looked into that, and it was urban planning. So when I got back, I was like, okay, maybe I want to be an urban planner above many other things. So I just put that in. I got it. It's been a whirlwind when I was there. There's a lot of in how the practice of urban planning, and I think there's some folks doing good jobs of calling like urban planning out. It's very it has racist type practices and procedures. It's like the haves and the have-nots. Because I always like wondered because I grew up in Rexdale. At that time, I'm like, yo, there's nothing here. But you go downtown, you got so much different amenities. It's very mixed use. Da 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 da. Got some cobblestone, people on bikes. Like it was two different worlds. So I'm like, why is that? And so it's by design, of course. And yeah, and from there, I'm like, okay, what can I do with my urban planning degree and give back to my people? So I've been like learning different things on the way, and kind of like with this particular infrastructure project, what we want to do in terms of supporting diverse founders, so not just Black founders with a building. And I've been dubbing it to investors and so on and so forth. Like this is like the Mars Discovery District for the West, or Northwest. And so having a state-of-the-art facility with housing on top, because we have a lot of, and that's creative mixed use. We have a lot of like West African founders coming with their families, but they're finding is that affordable housing, or sorry, housing is too much. Entrepreneurship is very risk-based. Like if it's like one or the other. If it's too much, they're not going to pursue entrepreneurship. And what is that innovation? What that means for talent? It's a brain drain. A lot of our founders are being swept to America, especially talent as well. So how do we keep talent, right? And a lot of it has to do with housing. And it has to do with amenities. So it's something it's all intersecting, right? And so that's why I can't, even though I hated some of my experience in planning, I can't knock it because it opened doors for me and it informs my decisions now as I work with entrepreneurs. And now when I'm trying to marry the two worlds, I do have the best of both worlds because I'm like, I can navigate the planning world and I can also navigate the entrepreneurship world and connect those two together because they both need each other, right? Founders, people, they need places to live, they need places to work, they need places to play. That's on the planning side, but I feel like they're not talking to each other. So let's come together and make infrastructure for community, right? So that's that in a nutshell, my urban planning experience. And yeah.
I think one of my last kind of things I wanted to touch on was, and I guess it's an amalgamation of everything we had spoken about up to this point, but you mentioned the condo that they're building at Jane and Finch. And I think, again, from my perspective of growing up in that area and your background in urban planning, I just want to kind of talk about what that means for that area, especially in terms of rent and, again, like equity, people who need affordable housing and people who can't necessarily afford to be in those places. Like, I know that when you see a condo, that means one, gentrification, and two, higher rent and things like that. But do you think this doesn't necessarily have to mean that, or do you think that's going to have an effect, a larger effect on the community at hand?
Yeah, we don't know. Like I think the mall owners are doing a great job of incorporating community throughout the process and over communicating with them. Um, but 20 years, it's a long time. Anything
Yeah,
can, it's so like
yeah,
I don't even know. Like when I was in the call, I was like, yo, I could be dead 20 years. Like I don't know. Like half these community members probably are, it's a transit community. Who knows what
yeah,
can.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, it's so open. So I'm like, people are doing the best like they can within the stuff they
Hmm.
with, which is great. I can't knock them. It's very extensive communication process. They're very open. But again, back to 20 years.
A lot can
Any
happen in 20
that's
years.
what I'm saying. So I'm like, gentrification is always on this, it's always on the
Yeah,
table. Like I
yeah,
say, for me, you can't stop it, but we can
yeah.
manage it, try to mitigate it, but it's always going to be present in some way. Like in Rexdale, like because of the LRT, things are
Hmm.
changing. So it's not just Jane and Finch, it's like everything West End. So I'm like, imagine when everything Crosstown's done. Who knows? Because
Yeah,
I see like we got cobblestone now, we got bike lights, like that's a thing because
it's like,
we're a very car oriented community.
yeah,
So to see that was blew my mind. I was like, now we have this? Why didn't we have this before? Like, so
true, true.
so things are gonna change for the good and for
Hmm.
who knows whatever, right? So
Yeah,
how can we mitigate it? How can we manage it? Um how can we honor the existing community, but also make room for the new community? That because it's
yeah.
gonna,
And
yeah.
I was gonna say that. I guess that was my like my last question, kind of. Was the idea of, like I said, we talked about the gentrification of it all, but those communities, Rexdale, Regent Park, Jane and Finch, those are such heavily like people of color, immigrant families, first generation families, and things like that. And they have such a prominent little Jamaica itself, like little prominent, very prominent cultures, right? But then I guess the idea of gentrification is that it kind of takes away from that. But these things, although better, like how can we have these really nice things that we as people of color deserve, but then keep our culture with it?
Yeah, whew, that's I don't know. I don't know because show me an example. Like I would love to see an example of the final product of where we honor that. I think there are
True.
some tools, strategies to keep things in place. But I that's a question, that's the $1 million question. How do we keep what's there that honor that historic, that culture,
Hmm.
also having the nice things? And I think honestly, it's compromise. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna be because of like 20, 30 years. I don't know. Like it's I can't cast myself in the future to see. I would love to see more historical uh
Hmm.
recognition, acknowledgement of the different diversities that make up these communities, that have built these communities.
For sure.
Um, and they are there, but the end product, who knows? I don't know. Not to leave on a bittersweet note, but I think there are wonderful grassroots groups, wonderful
Yeah.
nonprofits, wonderful different stakeholders that are interested to keeping things. And I think that's why you see products like the community land trust. Those are some
Hmm.
hard tools to say, hey, keeping certain things in place that you see people implementing, you see other communities. And so people are
Yeah.
from that, the commercial land trust, other ownership tools, pathways to ownership tools. I would say definitely hit up Black Urbanism in Toronto. Um, really, really great at looking at ownership and pathways to that. So they're not speaking about ownership, but how do we get
Yeah.
there?
Okay,
Uh,
nice.
as a collective community. So we
Hmm.
have different models, and for sure, we are incorporating that into our work. We are incorporating some other things into our work because it should be. It's a whole ecosystem that should our work should inform their work and vice versa. So again, I want to see more of our like collective of different non-for-profit groups, for-profit groups speaking to one another to see how can we build the whole community. Because I don't see Jenna Finch as just a standalone. I see it connected to
Sure.
other communities. It's connected to Rexdale because that's how the LRT is connecting us, right?
Yeah, it's literally connected.
There's the Downsview Park, which they're trying to build a massive city within a city.
I know, yeah. I've been in there. It's scary.
That's what I'm saying, and but that has implications for Jane Finch, and like
Yeah.
it's all ecosystem play, right? So how do we
Mm-hmm.
get it not just as neighborhoods, but a whole region, and honor the existing folks, whether it be Black, whether it be women, whether it be Indigenous, whether it be LGBTQ, all these groups, right? We built
Yeah.
this. We have a right to at least stay in the community, right?
Of
So.
course, of course.
So yeah, all that to say, I don't know, but we're
It's just a big shoulder shrug until the next 20 years, I
well.
guess.
I hope I well not. I hope not. Like I think it's all increments. 20 years is a long
Hmm.
time. I see it year by year.
Of
So
course.
if we continue to do the work, we're gonna see some fruits of our labor. Again,
Hmm.
the folks pushing for the community hub at Jane Finch, really, really big. The CLT that's coming, really, really big. So there are folks pushing it that
Yeah.
do shape what these communities look like 20 years down the line. But with that being said, 20, 30-year battles, you gotta buckle in, right?
You got to be
So
ready for it. I
yeah,
feel you. I feel
yeah.
you. It was great. It was great getting your insight on everything. I think I really appreciate hearing. Again, I can never stress enough like being from that area and having so much involvement in little things and like just being a kid and trying to figure out what to do and being an entrepreneur myself and also a youth entrepreneur trying to figure out how to get my foot in the door because it's not easy, you
Yeah,
know.
it isn't. And so I think also another way is looking at the ecosystem, looking at the region. And I love how Scarborough is doing it. They built it up in terms of because there's a lot, I know a lot of people there, a lot of creatives, and I love how creatives think because it's also about placemaking. It's about building. How do you build a region into a character so you can tell a story?
Hmm.
Can advocate
Hmm.
for that. So I would love to see what they're doing in Scarborough over in the Northwest side,
Oh yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
telling a story is advocating, is pushing it, is political, right?
For
Um,
sure.
and you see a lot of like what they're doing. Like I get hats off to them. And I want to see that more on this side of the city. But there are some Timbits, and again, they are doing that knowledge mobilization. So, like for example, the
Hmm.
Tamil Community Cultural Center, they raised a lot of money to create that cultural center, but they told a story. They mobilized,
Hmm.
and so we're using that as we see a lot of infrastructure projects using that as case studies for
Mm.
new informed equity seeking diversity led infrastructure projects, which is amazing. So I think
Yeah.
knowledge sharing is a key, and is now it's about what's the word I'm looking for? Is it attrition? It's what's that word, Jason? Like it's you got to stay there for a long haul to see it out.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, hopefully my ramblings helped. I dropped some gems. If not, I'm sorry.
Many gems were dropped. Many gems were dropped. I personally took a lot from it. So,
Yeah, yeah,
like I
yeah.
said, I appreciate that a lot.
It was
Sweet.
great. Thank you so much, Olu.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Have a good
Okay,
rest of the day.
bye.
Bye.